So this will be how to maintain the fuel system on a diesel. This is on a Perkins 40108 on a Irwin 42 sailboat. The nice thing I love about this as compared to most sailboats with aft cockpits, this is a center cockpit. As you can see, I've got room in the aft back there, is that I have total access to the engine all along the side, even down to where the transmission is. And then I can pull up these rugs and get further to where the packing is and all of that out the shaft. So total access to the motor, which is great. And a lot of sailboats don't have this option, which is a shame, but very thankful for a center cockpit. So what you're going to want to do anyway for moving forward with fuel is you're going to want to make sure that your fuel system is clean. It's recommended to change out your fuel filters like once a season. Most people either never change them or do them very, very seldom whenever they do. This system has your primary fuel water separator, and then we've got a fuel filter back there, and then we've got a secondary fuel filter up right here, and then of course it goes from there through these lines into the primary fuel pump, which is going to be here, and then it goes into your fuel rails and into your injectors. Now, the thing that's different about a diesel is, unlike regular gasoline engines, rather standard combustion engines, is that they have spark plugs, and the idea there is that the spark alongside the compression will create the explosion, whereas diesel is just extreme compression with the diesel, which causes it to combust. And so there's no spark, there's no ignition in that way, it's just compression. So in order to do that, all of these injectors and the rails have to be immensely compressed up in there. And so whenever you change out your fuel system, you want to make sure that you're bleeding the system before it gets to the primary fuel rails. If you don't, you risk vapor locking it, air locking it, whatever you want to call it, fuel lock. And I've done that before on my last voyage. I still had another 500 miles or so to go, and needed to have the motor working for that. So got stuck at a marina working on the fuel system. Took an entire day to get it unlocked and bleed out the system. Some are easier than others. But the idea there is whenever you go to change out your fuel is you're going to want to check first and foremost your fuel water separator, which on this application is just right here. You can see on the very bottom, I need to go ahead and drain mine a bit, clean it out. Where the brown is, that is accumulation of water as well as just debris. I normally get like this little toothbrush looking thing up in there and I'll clean it out. And of course the fuel is the red that's on the top. Since the fuel is lighter, floats to the top, water sinks to the bottom, it's heavier. So there's that little switch, little lever right there. And so you open that valve and it'll drain out right there, and you can drain it into like a solo cup or something like that. Doesn't really matter too much, and just dispose of your fuel wisely. And that's your first primary fuel filter, fuel water separator. So mine comes from the fuel tank, which is down there. I have an 85-gallon fuel tank. Goes through the primary fuel pump, which is that guy right there, and then goes into my fuel water separator. From there, it then goes out into, if I can get it over here, goes into my primary fuel filter, which is this guy right here. Now, in order to change a lot of these fuel filters for marine application, what you'll do is you'll actually have a top bolt right here. And what happens is you undo that thread, and it basically just goes straight through the filter. The filter's like got a hollow point on it, and it holds down the bottom of the cap right on the very bottom there. And then once the bottom comes undone, because you've loosened that top bolt, which I think was an 8 mil, the filter itself should just pry out, and you'll have a gasket on top you'll have a gasket on the bottom, and you'll have the filter squeezed in between there. So they're really, really easy to change. It's just the main thing is when you put a new filter on it, make sure, same as you would with your oil filter, fill this up with fuel, because again, you don't want to let air get pocketed inside the system. So go ahead and fill this with fuel. So you'll fill that up, and then you'll go to your remaining ones, which on this boat, again, there's one more, which is back there. Now for back here, this is where one of my bleeder valves are, or should I say just bleeder points, because all it is just where the bolt is. So once I changed out this guy, which again, same kind of thing, I took off the top. Actually, I had to take off this 90-degree elbow right here. Underneath that was the bolt to be able to loosen the bottom of the housing down there. So once that came out, it's the same thing, put the filter on, and then put the top gasket, the bottom gasket, and then you just kind of put this fitting back on. And then this guy right here, this is, on this system anyway, for a Perkins 4108, this is your first kind of bleed point. So you would loosen this and start priming the system. And what you want to see is you want to see air bubbles coming out of here until there's just a constant stream of diesel fuel just pouring out. I mean, not pouring, it's leaking, but you don't want to see any more bubbles or any more air pockets. You want to see just a constant flow of just diesel itself. And that way you know that everything from here back to the tank has now been purged of air. Now, if you're fuel locked in the system, you're now going to have to unlock this system, which is what I did. So you go strategically one point to the next point to the next point. So I had to start with the first pressure relief, which actually technically I had to fill the bowl for the fuel water separator. And then I filled the other fuel filter. Then I filled this one. And then I went ahead and started priming, getting all the air out. And then I followed the fuel rail down. And then it goes to quite a few pressure release points up here on the primary fuel pump. So it came to, a lot of times you just want to loosen some of these bolts, and you'll see where they are for your application. For a Perkins 4108, this was one of the main ones down in there. And then there should be an actual valve that's designed almost with like a T-head on it to be able to purge out fuel. I used this one as well. That was kind of a main point to start leaking out air. But remember, air is going to start rising throughout the system. So air is going to go higher and higher. And eventually you're going to get through your pump. And so you want this to be completely pressurized where there's just, again, liquid diesel pouring out. And then you'll move up into the system. Oh, there's that I was talking about. That's where you can start letting some out as well. So eventually you'll get it to where air is trapped only in the rails on your injectors. And what you'll do at this point, after bleeding the system, you'll have air pretty much just up here, is you'll start cranking over the motor. And you'll have your bolts connected to each rail. You'll have these undone. So this one, there's 4 of them. So you'll do, this bolt will be loose, this bolt will be loose, this bolt will be loose, that bolt will be loose. And then you start cranking. And you start cranking. If you know your firing order, that's best. I think mine is 1, 3, 2, and 4. And so you can start tightening them within the firing order because you know that's going to be purging out air. But what you'll see is you'll start seeing a lot of air bubbles coming out in here. Now again, you need an immense amount of compression inside this cylinder, inside the block on each cylinder to really get it to fire off. And so just keep cranking. Don't do it too much to where your starter starts overheating. In fact, it's good to probably let your starter, I don't know, 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, hold, start. Once it starts heating up, let it rest. You bled out a bunch, now try it again. Keep going. You'll feel it start to fire off whenever it does. You can open the throttle if you'd like to and increase throttle, keep it in like neutral. That way it's really, really pumping through. But again, it's just a game you got to play of getting all the air out of each injector up in the fuel rails, because this is the highest point on your system. So this is where air is going to finally be trapped. Now, what's helpful is if you can have an application like I have an actual bleeder. So when I hit on the turn on the bleeder, what it does is that pump starts automatically priming, and so it's just electric, and so now it's shoving fuel into the line all throughout the system and eventually up into here. So if you don't have an electric bleeder, I would say install one first off. But if you don't, what you can do is you can get manual bleeders where you can kind of like get something attached somewhere in the point. Typically it'd be kind of at a higher point and then a kind of a lower point, so you want to push it through and then keep pushing it up top. And so you can get like the manual like pump, and that'll start filtering fuel into the system. But ideally, if you're changing your filters, what you can do is you just, again, pour fuel into the filters as you go. That way it keeps them pretty much full and there isn't too much air in the system. And if you have a pump it a little bit. Go ahead and kick off your starter and it should be able to push it through. What happened for me last time I changed it is I kind of forgot about that. I wasn't thinking. It's a long voyage, and so I changed out the rear filter, cleaned out the primary fuel water separator, and then just kicked it off. And so the motor started and ran for about 30 seconds while it was still running what was left in the system, but then I had all the air finally caught up, and oh my gosh, I vapor locked this motor so hard. Like I said, it took an entire day just to finally get it cranked up again. But bleed out your system. That's the best way to do it. When you have a diesel, it's not fun changing fuel filters, but if you do it right, it's not that much of a pain. The main thing is, again, you just want compression up in here. That's about everything that I can think of. Again, this is an application on a diesel Perkins 4108, although all diesels are the same. They all still require compression. So just do that right. Thanks so much for watching. Hope this helps.